Hello, Mike.
Good evening, Mohit.
We are back.
We are at the same time, same place.
Absolutely. I noticed your background. It's got a tiger. Fantastic.
Yeah, I have a slightly appropriate background today, so we'll come on to that a little bit later.
Fantastic. I have to show you what's in front of me. I have an umbrella with a light which is lighting my face here. Here you can see the light.
You can see it reflected in your board.
Yes. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar again. Hey, John. Good to see you, my friend. Salil, the hardworking man. Gaurav, fantastic. Gaurav, welcome, Brian. So Broadstairs, which part of you said in Kent?
That's in Kent.
Okay. So Brian is from Sumit, Mahesh, Steve.
Steve again from area.
Richard, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Rohan is here.
We got good to see some early morning people in the US.
Yes. And well, I think it's pretty cold out there. Here it's getting warmer by the day, and although I still haven't started air conditioning, but a lot of people have, and I'm quite happy with the fan right now. Yeah, good. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. There is this one is going to be a longish slideshow, but very well designed by Mike and Salil, and I'm sure you're going to have a great time. Do I need to repeat the same introduction again? I think I should do it for.
See some new names, so not everybody knows us.
Yes, absolutely. So let me start reading that out again once, and let people know who you are. So friends, this is about Mike. Ever since his childhood in England, Mike has been fascinated with watching birds and recording and documenting bird sightings. Mike lived in Delhi in the year 2002. He was a very active member of Delhi Bird Club and contributed to the Atlas of Birds of Delhi and Haryana. After he moved to Bangalore, he soon got interested in exploring sites that weren't visited so frequently. He worked for Bird Count India to help promote Indian birding and especially high quality data recording. He's an eBird reviewer for India. His interest in bird recording and migration led to a short-term assignment of running the BTS Bird Track program. Each week he would check the BBC weather pages to find out what the weather had been like in Britain, so he could write an article discussing recent bird occurrences.
They've had some funny weather in Britain this week, I noticed.
Yes.
Very hot one day and snow the next.
Fantastic. And a bit about me. I am Mohit Agarwal. I'm blessed with 4 children, a son and a daughter, and 2 non-humans. 1 Labrador who's got ticks right now, and 1 escapee African grey. He's eaten up my sofa completely, Mike. I am a follower of Shiva. Professionally, I'm an experiential ecotourism specialist with a deep love for nature. I help people travel to some wonderful places in Asia. I'm the founder of Asian Adventures, a 26-year-old travel company. It's going to be 27 years in June. It is the largest and #1 bird watching tour company in India. The company is on a large mission to help Asian elephants with their corridors, free the Himalayas of plastic waste, and help small wildlife NGOs, and also save the ancient Himalayan shrines. My interest is to promote ecotourism and convert every tourist to an ecotourist. And I have some plans that I will discuss in the forthcoming webinars about global wildlife fair, which is going to be the marketplace for wildlife conservation. So a marketplace that will support wildlife conservation. I will talk to you about it in due course. I'll have the concept note ready very soon. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Mohit. Thank you again for the introduction. And apologies. We thought we'd do a slightly shorter one today, but then we still put too many pictures in and too many good birds, and there's too many mammals. So it'll be settle yourself down for another long hour, I think, and we'll get started. That's all the way. Let me go back to the beginning. Okay, so Central India. So many of you will be familiar with Central India, looking for wildlife here. It's a bit of a loose term what Central India means, really, but the main states are Madhya Pradesh and parts of Maharashtra, which is home to many of India's best tiger reserves. Also part of Chhattisgarh, and a generally mixed forest area, lots of dry deciduous forest, lots of teak and sal mixed with grasslands and things. So where we're talking is really slap bang in the middle of India. They tend to exclude Maharashtra is shown in full here, but we really exclude the coastal areas. So we're looking at the eastern sort of half of Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh is the green state, which is the main ones. Chhattisgarh is on the eastern side as well, not quite so often visited, but similarly, same sort of forests and much of the same wildlife occurs there. So it's actually, quite interestingly, this area in India is the oldest inhabited area of India, or oldest known. In Bhimbetka, which is not too far from Bhopal, and that has Stone Age finds, including some cave painting, which is about 10,000 years old, but signs of human habitation from 100,000 years ago. So there's a really interesting history generally. We decided not to include the Bhimbetka area, although it's quite fascinating, and it's also some good birding there, but we had too much to cover. So there's several tribes in this area. I'll talk about a few of the main ones, and you'll see people from the tribes in the villages around the tiger reserves that you go to in this area. The Kurku Tribe, about 1 million people in Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. So they were hunter-gatherers, but now are more stable cultivators. Well, potato and coffee is grown in this area. They have very traditional huts made of grass and wood. And as many other tribes, lots of traditional dance and music. So one of the most famous tribes in this area are Gond. There's various groups of Gond. It's sort of a tribal group. About 11 million people are Gonds. In this area, also to Orissa and Bihar, and in UP, Uttar Pradesh as well. There's a language, a Gondi language, which is dying out. So about 20% of people only speak that now. But they worship nature, typically. And what they're very famous for is their art. So really fascinating art. It's decorates houses and it's supposed to bring good luck to houses, and full of nature symbols. So it's all sort of lines and dots which make up the artwork. Very traditional patterns with animals, tree of life often here. You see the birds, the peacocks and things. Lots of colourful dyes used from flowers, mud, leaves, etc. It's a really interesting form of art you can find in this part of Madhya Pradesh especially. And there are other tribes around here. The Baiga is a nomadic tribe, not so much nomadic now, but they do slash and burn agriculture. Apparently they have a belief that if you plough the land, same patch of land, several times, it weakens the earth, and they worship the earth. There's one of the houses. They're traditionally bamboo houses, and they do a lot of bamboo work, but not so much bamboo in this one. And apparently, whether they do it anymore, I don't know. But if there's a death in the household, they abandon the house and build a new one. This is a Baiga tribal dance. And selling their produce at the local market, local bazaar. So, some food. What can you expect to have in this area? Lots of variety of good street food and snacks. This is a poha, tari poha, which is from Nagpur in particular, street food. Had here with breakfast, so we have a nice cup of chai as well. So poha, you'll find quite commonly, and you'll have it for breakfast if you stay in some of the resorts as well. This is it's made from flattened rice here with chickpeas. So quite a common breakfast meal. One of the other dishes here, butter kakis. So butter is corn, so corn on the cob, and geese means grated. So this is a dish made from grated corn. Might be familiar with these, some pakoras, moong dal pakoras. So these are dal. So moong dal is soaked, the batter made from that, and deep fried. So perfect snack for when you come in the afternoon after your afternoon safari and you get off the jeep and you're a bit tired and dusty, but you've had fantastic sightings, and you come in and have a cup of tea and some moong dal pakora. Gilavara is particularly from Amravati in Maharashtra. It's quite a large town in Maharashtra, in western Maharashtra. It's a chaat, a savoury snack food, street food. And Sambhavadi, another one from same sort of area in Maharashtra, is a roll which is fried. It has coriander and pulses, spices inside. A mutton curry, Sauji mutton. So Sauji is actually a community of people who are weavers. This is a traditional curry of theirs made, so mutton, which is goat meat, made with spices and coconut in this. And if you fancy something sweet, this is Mawabati. This is a sort of North and Central Indian sweet dish. So it's thickened milk with nuts and then deep fried and soaked in sugar syrup. So knock a few of them back in a day, and it'll be doing your heart some good. What this area is very famous for is oranges. So Nagpur in particular is extremely famous for oranges. They blossom in the monsoon time and pick them in December, January time. Just to make them less healthy, you can have a nice sweet, which is burfi, which you find all over India, different types of burfi, which is made with milk and lots of sugar. So this is orange burfi, which is very particular from here. And a particular tree, I don't know if anyone's heard of this, especially people from abroad. This is a mahua, the tree on the left, and these are the flowers, right? So mahua is used medicinally for many things. It's used fertilizer, it's used in cosmetics, fuel, but lots of animals and birds come to these flowers when they're flowering. So sort of this time of year, I suppose, March, April into May. Deer will feed on the flowers where they can reach them. Birds love them, bats love them. Sloth bears love them as well. And part of the reason that they love them is because the flowers, when they ferment, make an alcoholic drink. It's a very popular tribal drink in this area, and also seemingly quite popular from birds and animals. So we start our safari through central India. We're going to start from the north. So some of the various tiger reserves, national parks we'll visit include Panna, there at the top near the Khajuraho temples. And then we'll go south through Bandhavgarh and Kanha to Doba in the south, and west to Melghat. So this is all through Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. So starting in Panna National Park, it's a tiger reserve, as many of these. It was a former hunting preserve of the Panna family. And quite interestingly, actually, the area is known for diamonds. And I found a little story that apparently as recently as November last year, there was a young local man who was planning to join the police, but the recruitment was all frozen because of COVID and everything was locked down. So he was a bit bored, so he decided to lease some mining land for a while to pass his time. And after 2 weeks of mining there, he found a 7-carat diamond worth 30 lakh rupees, about 30,000 pounds. So not bad for a couple of weeks' work. This is just a map of Panna. You can see the river, the Ken River. It's marked as Shaimari on this map, but it's more regularly known as the Ken River. And you can do some really nice boat trips down the river through the gorges here. That's the Ken River. Really beautiful park, typical central Indian park, quite dry, mixed grassland and forest, and lots of ancient monuments dotted around as well. And of course, tigers. So Panna has a very interesting history of tigers. So in 2008, they estimated they had 24 tigers. I remember visiting just a few years before that, and the tigers got quite tricky to see. They said they used to be easier, and they weren't when I was there, certainly. In 2008, 24 tigers. 2009, none. So the entire population was wiped out through poaching. And it was a big controversy at the time because a lot of this was done with collusion and support of forest department officials. Poaching done by the local tribe, Pygmy tribe, but also outsiders, and completely removed tigers from the park. Post that, they started a reintroduction scheme from Kanha and Bandhavgarh, so tigers were relocated from there. They also they relocated the tribe outside of the park, and trained many of the people from there as guides. So now the tiger population has recovered nicely. They have about 50 or so tigers in Panna now. So thankfully that's a story of the past. One of the good places to see hyena. So some of these mammals are pretty tricky to see. They're present in most of the parks here, but not so easy to see. So hyenas are actually closer to cats than dogs, interestingly enough. And this rare antelope, or rarely seen antelope anyway, is a very small antelope, the smallest one in India, I think, the four-horned antelope, or chausinga. So it has two sets of horns, very solitary and not commonly seen. So plenty of birds in here. Actually, most of the birds that I'm showing today are found in all the parks, really. There's a few specialists that are distributed more in the northern parks or the southern parks, but a lot of these birds are widespread throughout, like the Indian roller, obviously. Painted sand grouse, again, they're scattered throughout India, actually, but difficult to see. They tend to be more nocturnal than chestnut-bellied sand grouse, which you might see in other areas. They come to drink in pools in the evening, but often when it's quite dark, they come in. But on your safaris with a jeep, if you're going through some of the rocky areas, you can sometimes find a pair or a small group loafing around on the rocks during the daytime. Common babbler is common in places, tends to prefer scrubbier areas. Crested bunting, really smart buntings, a winter migrant in this area. White-bellied Minivet is very nice Minivet, scarce, and a sort of central India, in fact Panna, I remember, was the place I saw my first ever white-bellied Minivet. It prefers quite open scrub areas, not easy to find anywhere in India. And raptors-wise, you'll find the peregrines resident here. So the resident peregrine we have in India is known as Shaheen. You can't see it so clearly from this angle, but it has very, very deep rufous or orangey underparts, unlike the peregrines most of us are used to from elsewhere in the world, and also a more solidly black hood. So they nest in cliffs in this area, and in the winter you can sometimes get the northern tundra peregrines, Calidus peregrine, which winters throughout India. Also on the cliffs, you can find a few Indian vultures still hanging on in this area after the crash in vulture numbers. And quite interesting here in central India, at least in Panna and the other sort of northern areas of central India, in the winter they get quite big groups of Himalayan griffons and other wintering vultures from much further north. Quite a lot of butterflies in this area. Lime swallowtail, which is one of the swallowtails that doesn't actually have a tail. And so a little detour from our birding. Close to Panna is Khajuraho, is a group of temples, Hindu and Jain temples. The Khajuraho group of monuments is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. and really fascinating. It's set in a lovely area with a few temples dotted around in the countryside, and a particularly famous one, the Kanbari Mahadev temple, decorated with amazing sculptures, really intricate carvings. And what it hasn't said in here is that what the carvings actually are of. So they cover all aspects of life. So dancers, musicians, warriors, teachers, animals. But most people are probably familiar with Khajuraho as it's famous for its erotic carvings, which this is a family webinar, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on what's there. But if you visit, you can get shown some interesting ones from your guides who might come and show you some euphemistically describe some group activity carvings and other things such as that. And when I was there visiting with my wife and a friend and his wife and children, the guide we had would pull my friend and I to the side, leaving us from the wives and children at times, and go and show us some interesting carvings. Say no more on that one. But it is a really fascinating place. The intricacy of the carvings here of all sorts of scenes are incredible. So then if you continue a little bit further south, a few hours drive south, we come to Bandhavgarh. Probably one of the best places to observe tigers in India. It was again a hunting ground, the Maharaja of Rewa. And one of the Maharajas there was known for capturing a white tiger, which you can see in his palace if you're going to visit his palace. So white tigers or albino tigers are extremely rare in the wild, but they do occur every now and then, commoner in captivity. So this is Bandhavgarh. The main core area is Thala, which is in the center of that map, and Bandhavgarh Fort, you can see, which you can see from that area, is one of the many historical sites here. So the fort up on top of that hill there, ruins of a huge hilltop fort. So it's obviously the dominant feature in the landscape around. A few water bodies, which, especially in the summer, attract a lot of the mammals to come and drink. And some of them might attract Indian skimmer, a flock of Indian skimmer flying here, which are scarce in this area. Changeable, you can visit, we talked about on a previous webinar. A little bit further north, you can visit Changeable on a starting Central India safari, which is a quite nice way to mix birds and wildlife. Very few water birds I'm showing actually in this webinar, but there are some really nice wetlands in some of these parks. And lots of village life you can see. So you usually get trips into the local villages from the resort, and the staff are from the local villages in most places. But this is really what you come for. This is a jeep safari. This is the gypsy, the typical Indian jeep that you'll do your safaris in. They're actually, it can be a bit frustrating if you're a birder rather than wildlifer, because you can't walk inside the areas of the park for obvious safety reasons with tigers roaming around. But the open jeeps like this are actually really quite good for birding. You can stop in the forest areas, you've got a full view around, so it isn't really a big problem. And typical pattern of a day, it might be to get up early, take your jeep into the park, and there are a few places where you can stop and get out in a sort of defined area and have your breakfast, have a field breakfast like this scrumptious one here. And of course, what you come for, tigers. So tigers are actually very good swimmers. So I'm sure, as everyone knows, it's the largest cat in the world. The stripe pattern on tigers is unique, so you can identify individuals from that. So they'll hunt spotted deer mostly, but they will take down large animals such as gore. And smaller things such as peacocks. So they do hunt peacocks. So in terms of conservation, Bandhavgarh is one of the most famous ones. Bandhavgarh and Kanha are probably the two most famous reserves you know of. So tiger numbers at about the turn of the last century, or about 1900, there were thought to be about more than 40,000 tigers in India, which is about half the world's population. Today, that number from the last census was just under 3,000 tigers. But that in itself is more than double the count from about 10, 15 years ago. So tiger numbers are supposedly on the increase, but that 3,000 tigers or ish in India, there are less than 4,000 worldwide. So India supports at least probably 3/4 of the world's tiger population now. You've also got leopards throughout all of these parks. There are commoner than tigers. There must be probably about 4 times at least many leopards, but secretive. They're solitary. They're mostly nocturnal. Spend a lot of the time in trees. So although there are more of them, they are more difficult to see than tigers. They'll prey particularly on monkeys, peacocks again, sometimes deer, and they climb trees and they'll drag their kills up the trees. So it's quite incredible if you see a dead spotted deer hanging from the branches like this. It's been dragged up a vertical trunk by a leopard. So Madhya Pradesh is probably the state that has the most of both leopards and tigers. Karnataka in the south has a good population, and then Maharashtra, obviously. So central India is the main place. Some of the birds here, painted spur fowl, a lovely one. It's not often you can see them this well. They're in thick vegetation, but they come out to feed on seeds and feed on grit by the roadside in the early morning. So you have a chance on your gypsy safari to come across a pair of painted spur fowls. The brilliantly barred jungle owlet is a fairly common diurnal owl. So you will see this during the day. With luck, maybe mottled wood owl. It's occasionally seen during the day. It's most active at dusk. It's a larger owl, close to a tawny owl size, for those who know tawny owl from Europe. Grey-bellied cuckoo. Small minivets are common, and a common sound, the really high-pitched whistle that they have. Indian golden orioles, also quite common. An Indian paradise flycatcher, spectacular male with this long white tail. So you get white-tailed ones like this. You also get ones with long rufous tails. Those are the 2 main morphs. And interestingly, breeding in this area, it's mostly the rufous ones, and the white-tailed ones winter seem to breed more in the Himalayas and winter further south. So the white ones typically do a longer migration from north of the rufous ones range to winter further south. But you do also get some interesting mixes. You'll see a rufous bird with white wings, and you might even see a long-tailed one like this with one of those long tail feathers being white and the other one being rufus. So people haven't quite worked out. It was Salim Ali used to think that they changed and rufus morphs became white morphs. Although that doesn't seem to be either. That's the case, but you do get a few interesting mixed ones. The well-named fantail. This is white-browed fantail with a thick white supercilium. But they get very confused, partly because people mix up the names. White-browed fantail is common in this area, as is spot-breasted fantail, which is quite similar. It has sort of black and white spots on the breast where this one's white. And white-throated fantail, which is more a Himalayan bird, and in other parts of North India, also occasionally winters in this area. And they are known to hybridize them as well, so they can be a confusing bunch, fantails. A long-tailed bird, greater racket-tailed drongo, very common throughout this area, and a fantastic mimic. So if you're often hearing something, you think you hear a leaf bird or an oriole or various other things, you have to exclude racket-tailed drongos. Grey-breasted prinear is a common forest prinear. Tawny-bellied babblers you can find in small groups. These ones you can see are fully orange on the throat. So this is the more north and central India subspecies. We get in the south the white-throated one. And butterflies you might find around here include the grey pansy. It's another slight break from birding. Bandhavgarh is a town not far from Jabalpur, which is one of the places you can fly in if you fly into this area. It's an interesting place here where the river runs through this gorge, known as the Marble Rocks. So these are rocks. They are a soft marble, so they've been carved by the water flowing through and by the rains during the monsoon. Really quite beautiful stretch of gorge through these rocks. And you come through on this river, through here a little bit, to the Duandar waterfall, which means Duan is smoke flow, presumably from the water vapor that comes off. So you can do a boat ride down the river in Bandhavgarh, and this area is very famous for its marble working. So the marble is actually quite soft, and you can carve it quite well. So there's lots of different things carved from marble, like Maya souvenirs here. And then on a little bit further south to Kanha. So probably the most famous of the tiger reserves, certainly in central India. It was originally established not as a tiger reserve, but for the swamp deer, which I'll talk about in a few slides' time. But it is a superb place to see tigers. It's famous for its meadows, wide open meadows, so they're good for viewing tigers. And tigers themselves actually are not too difficult to see because they're fairly diurnal, unlike leopards, so they are active and they will hunt during the day. They're also quite used to safari vehicles, so they're not bothered by people or several vehicles coming fairly close. They also like to walk along the forest paths, so you can find them not in the deepest vegetation. They'll use the forest paths or stream beds, and so they'll leave their marks, so punt marks you can see in the stream beds, so it can be followed and track tigers quite easily. And also the other animals are so scared of them that they'll very frequently alarm call. So if you're doing a safari, your guide or your driver are very alert to alarm calls of langurs and spotted deer and barking deer, samba, which will all alarm if there's a tiger nearby. So there's a map of Kanha. There's a few areas we tend to do safaris from. Mukhi in the south and Kanha in the middle there are very famous safari areas. So these are sun rising here over the meadows. So you get the early morning mist coming up, and these are part of the meadows of Kanha. Spotted deer, as I mentioned, spotted deer is very common in all these parts, in large herds. The favourite prey of tiger, and also wild dog, another favoured prey. So you can't walk in the forest, in the parks very much, but there are areas, especially closer to your lodge and on the periphery, where birding is fantastic, and you can do a walk with a naturalist who'll point out birds, trees, flowers, insects, mammals, amphibians, all sorts of things. But of course, you're here for tigers, or mainly tigers. So Kanha tigers are probably the most well studied. So in terms of the family life of tigers is extremely well known. And a lot of them have been named. First, this is Umapani, one of the largest known wild tigers. And I don't know how big or how it weighs, but I know they're supposed to reach up to about 300 kilos. So phenomenal one. This is a male. Males have this bigger and rounder face, rounder head. Another of the well-known tigers, Choti Mara, that's a female. Unfortunately, it was a few years ago, it was known that it had 3 cubs from one litter, and all 3 cubs were killed by a different tiger, a sub-adult male tiger. So they're not don't really take kindly to other tigers in their area, especially other male tigers. And I think her litter she had after that, I think 2 tigers died out of that. I think maybe natural causes, but she did have then one successfully raised child. And another, possibly the most famous tiger by name anyway, known as Munna. It's actually the father of the first tiger we just saw here. This is one of the oldest known tigers in Kanha, or anywhere in fact, and particularly recognizable. I'm not sure how well you can tell on the smaller photo, but if you look at just above the eyes, on the forehead, it looks like it's spelling C-A-T, cat. So Munna is very easily recognized. And just in case my mom and dad are watching this webinar, this is the tiger we saw 5 years ago when we were in Kanha. But Munna is, as I said, it's a very old tiger. It's quite controversial, in fact, when I was there, because it had got too old to hunt well. So it was hunting exclusively cattle, domestic cattle around. And it was coming into conflict with humans a little bit. It did injure a man and apparently killed a young girl at one point in recent years. So it was actually captured and taken into captivity just over a year or so ago, 2 years ago. And unfortunately, Munna died last month in captivity, but about 19 years old. So some of the other wildlife there, Sambar deer. It's the largest deer in India. Usually find these on their own. Unlike this one, which comes in small herds, this is the swamp deer. So this is what Kanha was started for. Barasinga, which means Bara means 12, and the Singa means tines or prongs, or what the antlers are. So they have 10 to 14 tips typically on the antlers, which is different from all the other Indian deer, which have a lot less. There's a couple of subspecies of swamp deer adapted to the areas they live in. So known as the hard ground and soft ground swamp deer. So Kanha is famous for the hard ground swamp deer, which occurs almost only here. The soft ground swamp deer occurs in northern parts of India and Tarai, so parts of Uttar Pradesh and into Nepal. And there's another subspecies, eastern swamp deer in Assam, so you can find in Kaziranga. So this one in Kanha, in this area, used to be herds of thousands of swamp deer. But the loss of habitat, poaching for meat, poaching for the antlers, and disease amongst a very small population pushed it very close to extinction in the early 70s. So a captive breeding program was started then, and now the numbers in Kanha have swelled very successfully. So I think there's about 700 or so swamp deer in Kanha. So you will see Barasinga if you do a trip to Kanha. Beautiful antelope is the black buck. There's a few black buck here in central India, mostly grassland animals, so you find them Rajasthan, Gujarat, but Kanha is also quite good for them. And gaur, the largest wild cow, which in India, if you're doing a safari, you'll find everyone refers to as bison or Indian bison, but it is not actually a bison, it is a cow. But it's huge. The males, it's one on the left, incredible bulk. So they occur in small herds, usually led by a female, but males join them from time to time, or in the rutting season in particular. So they're quite shy, but there are many places in India where they come very close contact with humans. Not so much in this part of the country, but in the south, in the tea estates areas, gaur are a major problem, because although they're shy, they have very poor eyesight, they're easily disturbed, and they can be very aggressive and dangerous. Civets, you might find, are a little bit of luck at night and sometimes around your resorts, as the resort you're staying in. This is common palm civet, which is often found or climbs up trees more often and feeds on fruit and flowers quite a bit. And flying fox, as it's called, this is a bat. It's a common bat species, but one of the largest in the world. And you'll find big roosts of these in daytime. They're roosting upside down in trees. several hundred or thousands together even. And you'll hear the squeals and the squawks from these. And they come out at dusk, so they feed at dusk, and you can see lines and lines of flying foxes flying over at dusk. One of the small bats find around here is a pipistrelle, one of the smallest bats. One of the first that comes out in the evening. Spotted owlet is a very familiar small owl. Not so familiar at all because it's strictly nocturnal. Is oriental scops owl. This one is the really impressive rufous morph. So they come in rufous and grey and brown morphs. Quite common, quite heard quite a lot, but not seen too often. One of the fairly common raptors in most of these areas is changeable hawk eagle. The ones here have quite a long crest. There's two main subspecies of hawk eagle. One of the other impressive eagles you find around, particularly around the lakes and the large slow-moving rivers, is grey-headed fish eagle. White rump vulture, tree nester, unlike the Indian vulture, and this is the one, well, along with Indian vulture and slenderbill vulture, that has absolutely plummeted with the decline in vultures. So you'll still find small numbers around in this area. These are two juveniles, but their numbers are 99.9% down from what they used to be. It's interestingly, red jungle fowls occur in this part of some of the more of the northern central India forests. This is red jungle fowl. You're used to seeing more in the foothills of the Himalayas, particularly. Pretty unmistakable, but it's not actually, because you get lots of reports of domestic chickens that get confused with them, because some of the domestic chickens look extremely similar. Common hawk cuckoo, familiar sound, brain fever bird from its call, which rises and rises and seems to be getting madder and madder. Black hooded oriole is a common resident in this area. As is brown-cheeked fulvetta, fairly unobtrusive, and is in small flocks. A bit commoner in the Western Ghats, but actually occurs in central India and through the northeast as well. And white-rumped shama, which is an incredibly melodious singer. So heard quite often, not quite so often seen, but usually you do manage to see some good views. But beautiful song shamas have. This is Scarlet Minivet, one of the larger minivets. This is resident. In the winter, in parts here, you'll find long-tailed minivet as well, which is extremely similar to scarlet. It doesn't have these spots, the red spots on the tertials that the scarlet minivet has, you can see here. But if you're not looking at the right angle, they can be quite difficult to tell apart. Golden-fronted leaf birds. Red-breasted flycatcher is quite a common winter visitor. A tiger flycatcher also occurs in these parks as well. Not as common, but it's not unusual. One of the common wintering warblers and passage warblers is greenish warbler. Not so common, but occurs on passage only, passing through to further south in India for the winter, India and Sri Lanka, is forest wagtail. Really smart bird and unique amongst the wagtails in that its tail wagging is done from side to side rather than up and down. Another of the common butterflies you can find, zebra blue. And then down to Pench. So Pench is over the border of the two states, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. Another part that has a river running through, that's what it's named after. So Pench, great for wildlife in general. It's famous as Kipling country. So it's known as the inspiration for the Jungle Book, which Kipling wrote back in the late 1800s. which everyone knows very well, I'm sure, and knows some of the characters, Shere Khan the tiger, Baloo the bear. Kipling often refers to Seoni, which is the district around Pench, and there's lots of references to the book, but actually it's not so well known that he never actually went there himself, and it really isn't known where he set the Jungle Book. So it might not be central India at all. Lots of his references are into Rajasthan, they're into northern India, so it's quite possibly not here. So Pench will claim it is the home of the Jungle Book because the references to Seoni. Kanha does as well, but they could well both be wrong. So this is Pench River in the middle. There's a dotted line, which is the border of the two states. So you have Madhya Pradesh and in the north, and Maharashtra in the south. So around this area, you can go and use the traditional transport. You go and take a bullock cart and have a traditional lunch as well. This is a thali, which thali is actually a name of the plate, but also means the selection of dishes that are served like this. So one of the sites around Pench is Pajta, Pottery Village. So almost all the families in this small village are involved in pottery. So a nice area just to cycle around some of the villages here, outside the park, so you don't need to worry too much about being surprised by a tiger leaping out of the bushes. But of course, come back on the Jeep safari, back into Gypsy through the forests. And looking again for tigers. So Pench also has a good population of tigers. And along the Pench River here, this is part of a herd of wild dogs, or dhole. Dhole is actually, the name means daring. So wild dogs are pack hunters. And they prey on quite large animals, samba deer, for example, and they'll just chase them until the deer is too tired and gets surrounded and is taken down. So, right, a smart-looking dog. They live in these groups. Usually there's a dominant pair, maybe up to sort of, well, maybe 5 or 6, but sometimes up to maybe about 20. And interestingly, wild dogs can't bark. They don't bark and they don't howl, but they whistle. And you hear various other noises that are not very dog-like. Other dogs you may find in Pench is the wolf, Indian grey wolf on the left, golden jackal on the right. So the wolf, we showed wolves when we were in Ladakh on one of the earlier webinars, and they were like thick-coated animals. So here in the heat of Indian summers, the wolves are thin, very slender, very long-legged animals. Again, they hunt in packs for things like blackbuck. We saw that sort of size mammals, but quite rare now because of persecution and habitat destruction. Golden jackal, on the other hand, is quite common, and you'll hear them at dusk very often. They do howl. You can hear them around most of the resorts. Crested serpent eagle is a fairly common sight. Yellow wattled lapwing. This is probably adult, not quite in full plumage. The cap is much darker. They're in their full breeding plumage. This is an Indian cuckoo, smaller, dark-eyed, slightly smaller, dark-eyed cuckoo. It's not that easy to see when most people visit in the winter, but a common sound in the summer. It has a 4-noted song, which can be transcribed as "I'm a cuckoo," or "one more bottle" is one of the ways that's remembered. And cuckoo shrike. This one's a large cuckoo shrike. The common woodpecker in this area is black-rumped flameback. And large kingfisher, especially along some of the rivers, on some of the forested streams, is stalk-billed kingfisher. One fairly unusual species to find here, especially, well, unusual if you go by the name. It's Malabar pied hornbill. So it's endemic to the Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, but also extends throughout quite a few central Indian parks. Blackmail Monarch, beautiful blue color. This is quite common. This is a common resident. Brahminy starling. Orange-headed thrush. The southern and central Indian one with the black and white stripes on the head, unlike the one in the north, which is fully orange. Thick-billed flowerpecker, very nice picture. This one showing the red eye, the big bill, and the greyish streaks that it has down the throat and breast. Another of pansy butterflies. This is yellow pansy. And down to Tadoba now. Tadoba in Maharashtra. The first national park in Maharashtra. Another excellent tiger sanctuary. I think they have about 40 tigers, fairly regularly seen here, and great birding as well. You can't see very clearly on this, but you have a big dam and lake on the left side, and in the park there's three main areas: Tadoba in the north, Mohari and Khalsa, three different ranges of forest. You can visit multiple ones on one safari by jeep. This is the dammed lake nearby. So, back in our gypsies, back through the forest. Looking out for tigers again, of course. Get a bit tired of tigers now, eh? We're looking for some other cat, really. Maybe we can find something like this. Black panther. Called black panther. It's a leopard. It's a melanistic leopard. And this one is really quite an interesting one because you can see how this is melanistic. You can see the rosette pattern on this one. So they vary. You get some that are almost entirely black and you can't see any patterning. Not very easy to see anywhere. And continuing on finding more interesting cats than tigers, this one is fantastic. This is a tiny rusty spotted cat, one of the smallest wild cats in the world. So this is probably about the size of a domestic kitten, not a full-grown cat. It's it really is small. It's also endemic to India and Sri Lanka, the only endemic cat. And it has these very indistinct spots on quite a plain body, but the face pattern is great. These black and white lines around the face. Very rarely seen, almost entirely nocturnal. And also nocturnal, but a bit more often seen, is the civet. This is a small Indian civet, which is feeds a little bit more on the ground than the palm civet that we saw earlier. And one thing Tadoba is quite good for is sloth bear. So sloth bear, they'll climb trees, they eat berries, flowers. They also eat lots of termites and ants. So you'll see their claw marks in places. And in particular, in this time of year, April, May, they really love the mahua flowers that we saw earlier, even getting drunk to some extent on mahua. And they're quite harmless, sloth bears, but because they have poor eyesight, and particularly at times when they're in the forest edges at the same time when the villagers are trying to collect forest produce and things, or villagers collecting mahua, for example, they can be very easily surprised. And if you've seen their claws, you don't want to be surprised by one. So they can be quite an issue where they come close to humans. So they carry their cubs around on the mother's back. And these are the bears that were in a lot of trouble in India because they were captured for dancing if you've seen the dancing bears, particularly in Agra or that area if you came several years ago. And poaching, of course, a lot of poaching for body parts and for taking dancing bears. So thankfully that dancing doesn't happen anymore, but they're still quite difficult to see and rare. There's a wonderful gore again. Barking deer, small, or muntjac, a small deer that's usually on its own in quite dense vegetation. And I thought I'd better put a nice water bird in because we haven't really covered any. These are great. These are cotton pygmy geese. You can find on some of the vegetated pools in all these parks. And we saw earlier red jungle fowl. This is grey jungle fowl, endemic to India. This is one place in India where their ranges overlap. So red coming from the north overlaps with the grey jungle fowl from the south. So some of these parks, Tadoba and one or two of the other ones in southern central India, have both jungle fowls. Painted francolin is not very easy seen. It's a resident. It's fairly common, but it's secretive. In the monsoon is the time to see it when they'll perch prominently and call. Jungle bush quails are quite common, small coveys of these. Again, not very easy to see. And if you could ever come in the summertime, that means when they're much easier. White-bellied drongos, common. Circia malcoa is never very easy to see. Type of a member of the cuckoo family. Very dry and rocky areas. They often walk around on the ground, almost mongoose-like. Ashy-crowned sparrowlark is a very familiar bird of drier areas. Same sort of habitat for the smart rufous-tailed lark. This one's a young one with all the pale fringes to the feathers. Yellow-throated sparrow, or chestnut-shouldered petronia, the bird that's very famous in India because it's the one species that effectively turned Salim Ali from a hunter to a conservationist. Indian grey hornbills, a pair at their nest here, widespread, and you'll find them in parks and gardens, larger parks and gardens as well. Chestnut-tailed starlings. Nice common iora, female common iora. And stunning Indian pitta. Unfortunately, if you come on a typical safari, you're coming in the winter, and pittas here are common in the summer. They breed in this area, but most of them winter further south in India and Sri Lanka. There's a really common sound in May, June time in some of these central Indian and northern Indian forests. One of the spectacular butterflies, fairly common in India, the blue mormon, a large butterfly. So finally, our last tiger reserve, the last place we're going to visit today, is Melghat. So Melghat in northern Maharashtra. It's in the Satpura Hills. There's some other great places in the Satpura Hills which we're not covering today. But this is Melghat along the Tapi River in Maharashtra. Bhimkund is quite a well-known holy place, very famous for the pools of supposedly very pure and blue water. One of the interesting forts in here, Gawalgarh Fort. This was in the early 1800s. This was captured by the British by Colonel Arthur Wellesley, who some people who are watching today might know more as the Duke of Wellington, who he later became, who then, of course, defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. And Melghat, of course, is a tiger reserve. So again, a good population of tigers, but not quite so easy to see here as some of the other reserves. but a great place generally as well. There's some more spotted deer. And the commonest wild cat, although you might well see more tigers because they're a little bit easier to see, jungle cat still fairly commonly seen. Can be confused a bit with a domestic cat, but very long legs, long ears. You can't see from here, but it has these black stripes around the legs and the tail. This is a flying squirrel, giant flying squirrel, ones that glide between the trees, holding their forelegs and hind legs out, and they have this flap of skin between them that helps them glide. So it can be fairly often seen. They roost in tree holes and forks, and they use the same roosting places very regularly. So your guides often know exactly where to find a flying squirrel. And this I wanted to put in. This is something that, well, I've never seen. Not many people have seen. The Indian pangolin, or scaly anteater. This is unfortunately is most famous now for being the most trafficked species that there is. Anything. So, as I'm sure you know from cartoons and things, it curls into a ball from predators and it has this thick, scaly armor. Well, it's poached for almost every part of the animal. So it's poached for meat, obviously. The skin is used in leather, shoes, for example, but the scales themselves are taken. The scales are used as charms, they're used as rings. Even the tribes locally in this area, the Gond tribe, for example, think that wearing a band of scales around the waist helps relieve back pain, I think it is. And medicinal purposes, some of the parts used in medicinal purposes, so incredibly endangered. Red spur fowl, you can find in a lot of these central Indian parks. Rock bush quail, like the jungle bush quail we saw earlier, but prefers the much rockier areas. It's rarer, not so easy to see. Again, monsoon time, it becomes far easier. Some of the raptors you'll find, short-toed snake eagle. And Benelli's eagle. This is a juvenile Benelli's eagle. Indian nightjar is probably the commonest nightjar. And a few other fairly widespread and common species to finish here. The yellow-crowned woodpecker, the small pied woodpecker. Indian yellow tit, also known as black lord tit. And Indian nuthatch. And there's one particular bird. I said most of these birds we've talked about are actually fairly widespread through some of the parks here, but there is one that is not, and Melgut is particularly famous for, which I'll come on to after another smart butterfly, spot swordtail. But this bird, the forest owlet, so particularly amazing discovery or rediscovery. So the forest owlet was collected, the first specimen was collected in 1872 in Madhya Pradesh by a British officer called Blewett, Francis Robert Blewett, hence the scientific name for forest owlet, which is Athena blewettii, sorry. And there were very few specimens known, about 5 specimens from Maharashtra and Orissa. There's a specimen from Gujarat collected by the famous Richard Meinert-Sargon, who some of you might know, collected from Mandvi on the coast, near the coast in Gujarat. And this is 1914, he collected his specimen, but there were no sightings in the wild. And since 1884 was the last reliable report, and the bird was just unknown. Investigation later realized that Meinert-Sargon's specimen from Gujarat was actually one he'd stolen, and it was one of the 1880 specimens that he'd stolen from the British Natural History Museum and relabeled, as he was known to do. And that wasted lots of time from later researchers trying to work out whether forest owlet still exists and where it would exist. So in the mid-70s, Salim Ali spent a year or two in different areas altogether, looking in Orissa and Melgut here, and in Mandvi, looking for where Meinert-Sargon had found his bird. and they didn't find it. So they did presume at one point that it was potentially extinct. Then in November 1997, Ben King, famous American ornithologist, and Pam Rasmussen, similar, and David Abbott in a group spent some time looking for this bird in western Orissa and through a lot of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra. They spent about 2 weeks not finding it in various places. And in the Satpura range of hills, so this is west of Melghat itself, in northwest Maharashtra, they finally found a bird. So they saw one in the middle of the day, sat at the top of a tall tree in the sun. Incredible sighting. What a feeling it must have been when they realized what they were looking at, because it had been 113 years since the last reliable sighting. There is the forest owlet on the left and a spotted owlet on the right. So it's quite a large head, and it's sort of thickly feathered, the thick toes it has, but it's quite boldly patterned. So you can see how the patterning differs from spotted owlet. No spots on the crown, and this nice breastband that it has, and the thin white eyebrows that it has. So actually a fairly distinctive bird, quite different from the spotted owlet. And it was found to be very diurnal. It was hunting during the day. It did what they found it doing, sitting at the top of an open tree in the heat of the day at times. So actually quite obvious. So it's interesting that it was missed and not found despite Salim Ali's search. There's been a few searches since in those years. So after it was rediscovered, so in the late 1990s, there were some surveys done in Maharashtra, through Madhya Pradesh, Orissa, parts of Andhra Pradesh, looking for it. And they discovered 2 new sites for forest owlet. And that's Melghat, where we are here. And then another one in Madhya Pradesh they found at the time. And since then, it's also been found in Tansa Wildlife Sanctuary, which is very close to Mumbai, actually, and in Gujarat. So the central blob on this map is the Melghat area, predominantly. And then west of that is the little bit in Gujarat, and then the smaller blocks on the southern tip of the range shown here are fairly close to Mumbai. So it's being found a little bit more, but in quite fragmented forest, not necessarily in protected areas, and it clearly is very rare. There aren't many of these birds. But now, thankfully, you can visit Melghat and you have a reasonably good chance of seeing it, or you can even do a couple of days trip from Mumbai if you're passing through and on your way to anywhere else, and maybe find one of the few forest owlets. Probably 100 or 200 birds exist only. So that probably is the real specialty bird of central India. Quite an amazing bird, and to think that was missed for so long. Probably because not many people were looking, admittedly, in these areas. And a lot of the forest that it was in originally has disappeared. But there you go. Thank you for joining us on this wander through central India. Again, a huge thank you to the fantastic photographers and their images from here. And for those people who helped with content, Salil, Gaurav, and Tia again. Thank you very much. I should just add the one extra thanks. You pointed out the picture on my wall behind me, Mohit, but that's a tiger, obviously, but it's a Gond style tiger. So it's done in the style of Gond art by my daughter when she was 9 years old.
Fantastic. So, Mike, I suddenly remember a story. I was Gurpal. I don't know if you know this friend of mine, the funny man.
Yeah.
He and I were walking through Melghat long distances about 30 years ago, and that's when we were allowed to walk through the forest with special permission. And our guide was a funny man. He was a Kurku Tribe, and he seriously believed that the sloth bears can only see you upside down. So for him to see you properly, he has to bend forward, bend down, stick his head between his legs for you to see standing straight. So that was hilarious. And the many such stories that these people come up with. and there's a lot of wisdom as well. So I think traveling with, being guided by the forest people and the tribals and the ancient wisdom that you can draw from them is huge. And they will come up with they're the best trackers that you have. Sometimes their sixth sense or the intuition is so strong that all your jungle indicator science fails in front of what they can show you, where they can lead you, and what. So hats off to them as well, and those people who still live in the jungles, and because of them the jungles are still there. So it was absolutely brilliant webinar. Mike, go ahead and answer the questions that people may have.
Yes, yeah, we got some. I'll have a quick look through what questions we got, but any questions earlier? A few people mentioning Munna, the tiger who unfortunately died. It's quite interesting how that all these tigers are almost treated like celebrities, the famous Kanha survivors. And Anteater Qureshi's mentioning a nice thing you can do in Panna, where they have started a program you can walk with the tribals in the buffer areas. It's fantastic to walk with people who actually sort of live in these areas. When you get a chance to walk, as you can do in some areas around here, it's fantastic forest.
Fantastic.
Gharial is on the Ken River. Venkatesh mentioned you have a chance of seeing Gharial there.
Yeah, it's amazing how the tigers made a comeback in Panna, and how beautifully it is.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I said a lot of these birds are found in all these places, but all these parks have their subtle differences, don't they? Their landscapes are quite different, and some of their wildlife is quite different. So it's difficult to know which ones to go to, I think. I've not done them all, but I need to.
Yeah, but you're off to the Himalayas in a few weeks.
So I am, yes. It's partly the reason why we won't have another webinar for a little while. I've got some stuff to do, but I'm very excited about this one. So I'm doing a couple of trips to the Western Himalayas, which is this time of year in India, April, May time, it's the best place to be. I think quite a lot of people have visited these areas in the winter, but it's the spring and early summer, it's the time to visit, really. So I'm doing a trip to the Great Himalayan National Park, which is open. We're looking for people to come and join us. So this is particularly in the first week of May, 1 week altogether from Chandigarh. So what we're doing, we're going to the Great Himalayan National Park, and we can't go to the Great Himalayan National Park in April and May without trying to see one of the rarest and most spectacular birds in Western Himalayas, which is Western Tragapan, which I've certainly never seen. This is a trip I've wanted to do for years and years and years and haven't got around to doing it. So what we'll be doing in the first week of May is doing a trek into some of the prime habitat for Western Tragapan, which we have a good chance of seeing, but even if we don't, we should see lots of Himalayan monarchs, we should see copper's pheasant, cheer pheasant. What else? Loads of bullfinches, red-headed bullfinches, even orange bullfinch if we were really lucky. What else? We've got grosbeaks, collared grosbeak, spot-winged grosbeak. Just fantastic birding and pristine landscape, maybe with a Western Tragapan to round it off. So we're doing a trip where we'll have 4 days where we're actually trekking up and camping some of these areas. It's needs a reasonable level of fitness. Like it's some steep treks, but then once they're there, we'll rest around and with a bit of luck find some Tragapans, but we'll know we'll find a lot of other good stuff. So I'll send the link, put the link in the chat, and I think we'll everyone who's on the call will find an email from you or me in the next day or two talking about this. But if you want to join me in the first week of May to do Great Himalayan National Park and maybe see a Tragapan, which I've never seen, so the beers will be on me when we get back if we see one. Please join me because I'm quite excited to get. Well, I'm very excited to get out anywhere at the moment, but particularly for this trip. So it'd be fantastic to have a few people joining me here.
Yeah, and then you can also promise them some trout. Okay. Yeah, you'll find them in those waters. So none of us saying that our elephants were elephants, always found in central India. So currently they've been pushed out of this Orissa area because of the disturbances and other things, and then you find them now more in this area, and then this population, which is now in Bandhavgarh, is there to stay. So there have been instances, there have been records of elephants visiting, the areas in central India, and historically they've been there as well. But as the time passed, they were more in the Eastern Ghats and those areas. But now you can see the kind of pressure that's building up. The corridors are getting fragmented, so you can see them coming into central India as well. So if you want to know more about it, I think just write to Wildlife Trust of India, because they have their team stationed there, and they can give you the update as to what is happening with the elephants in central India currently.
I suppose I should have mentioned that after I'm back from the Great Himalayan National Park, then I'm off to Ladakh at the end of the month, because I just felt that having done the webinar in Ladakh and not been for several years, I should go back. So I'm doing a trip with a friend and our daughters as well. And so we're doing that end of May. But then I shall probably hang on in Ladakh or go back in June, July time. So again, anyone who's interested in doing Ladakh and doing some brilliant birding and animals in June, July, let us know. Come and join us for that.
I think you're just being a bit, you're just teasing them. This is
yeah.
And it's COVID time.
No, you can't do this virtual birding and virtual wildlife all the time. I'm not doing any more webinars. I'm actually going out to see the things now. So come and join me on them. Join me on for the real thing.
Yes. Yeah, sure. The Indians can easily do it. They can take a flight in and then into Delhi or to Chandigarh, and then drive up from there. But
yeah. Unfortunately, sorry, I'm probably annoying all our foreign friends who are listening to this at the moment. Me sounding exciting, because we were very hopeful of doing a trip with Brian in July for Ladakh, which I'm not sure can happen. I'm not sure he's going to get allowed out of the UK. But in case you do, Brian or anyone else, we'll do that.
Yep. So Tony, I've put my email ID down for you to see, and then I'll also put Mike's so that you have both our email IDs, and then you can always get in touch with us.
That's right. Quite happy to chat about these places and ideas for traveling, even if you're not joining me and you're interested in traveling on your own or in a small group. I'm happy to talk about options anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So wonderful. And do you want to share the checklist that you have here?
Yeah, an interesting one actually. There's we'll put it in the files thing. There's a checklist that we've put together. So on all the trips I do, Mohit mentioned me at the start and said how much I sort of use eBird. I'm an eBird reviewer for India. I'm an eBird addict, or I'm actually a data addict. I've always recorded all the birds I see everywhere. So one of the things I've tried to do with trips I do is produce a checklist that we certainly fill in at the end of the day to keep a log of things, but also put everything onto eBird. But one of the things is to try and produce accurate checklists, because if you look at tours on the web and places or websites, you find checklists that are full of inaccuracies. There are far too many birds that don't really occur in the area or not. So I've been producing some checklists based on eBird data, so it's based on actual verified sightings. So there's one we're just sharing there, which is the Great Himalayan National Park, which is specific to visiting in May to the Great Himalayan National Park, and we're also trying to put a little key on how likely you are to see different birds. So, for example, just on a sort of medium, low, high basis, and very high. So I was checking earlier, and Western Tragopan in the first week of May, we have a high likelihood of seeing it. Not quite very high, but better than medium. So.
Excellent. Good, Mike. I think Vivek's been calling me to go to Ladakh and then also to Kargil to look for the brown bear in Kargil, and
Yep.
I don't know. I will see if I want to go in May, early May, but we'll see what the situation is. Anyway, so friends, next Thursday, Mike, are you coming back online or you still?
I'm having a break.
Okay. So friends, next Thursday we'll bring something else to you related to wildlife, but you will see Mike a few weeks later. And in the meantime, we'll keep you updated with whatever is happening in India around us. And you will have a webinar tomorrow on Uganda by Johnny Kamushiga. I think I've got the name right. So Johnny is going to be here at 7:30, and then later next week I'm going to have people from Sri Lanka and other places joining us. So we'll keep sending you information. Do keep signing up for these webinars, and these are all sort of birding made easy, wildlife made easy webinars, educational webinars that we committed to doing for people, who are in our network and in our audience list. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Mohit. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Namaste. See you in the Himalayas.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.